Hello, humans, if that is indeed what you are. Maybe you're those lizards from that movie V from a while ago. That's true, it was a show. It was also a miniseries. Anyway, I like that show. That's got nothing to do with what I'm talking about now, though. What we're here for now is a review of Billy Summers by Stephen King, and also I'll briefly talk about later, also by Stephen King, because I did a Stephen King list fairly recently of all the books I'd read in order, but since I had finished that list, I read these two other ones by King, so I thought I'd give a quick review of those two. So first up we got Bomp, Billy Summers. If you don't know much about this, it's essentially a pretty generic setup. We've got a former military guy who's now a hitman, but he only kills evil people, right? And he's on his last job before he hangs up the old sniper rifle, like right out of the 1980s cliche plot. So the plot is pretty, like I said, uber generic. Nothing to get too excited about. Starts out, and of course, what's he going to do for his job? He, of course, has to hang out in a small town. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, great. We're going to get this guy sitting in a small town for 450 pages, and at the last 10 minutes, he's going to shoot a guy, game over. But no, that's actually not what happens, surprisingly. Stephen King breaks very slightly out of his normal maneuver, and he changed things up. And so he sort of leaves that small town after only about 20% of the book. One thing that's interesting about this is his cover story is that of a writer. So one of the annoying bits is you have to hear about how amazing writing is, how it's important. Stephen King's like, oh, my job's the best job. That's Stephen King's voice, if you never heard him speak. But what I do like is that the novel within the novel that Billy Summers' character is writing is like super good. It's like significantly better than the actual novel. So at first I'm like, oh great, I want to read this crap novel in a novel. And then I'm like, oh, actually I want to read the actual novel. I want to read the novel in a novel. Let's get to those parts. Because they're kind of about his history when he was like a young dude, this Billy Summers guy, and his career in the military. And although you don't get the whole novel, you get chunks, those parts are really good. And then interestingly enough, the hit, which I figured would be like the climax, comes very early because that's just the setup to what essentially becomes kind of like a guy on the run looking for revenge. Still not that creative, but it's kind of interesting for a while. Plot happens, twists, some characters get introduced that sort of shake up the depth of what's going on. But then he randomly runs into like this girl. It's a pretty stupid setup, to be honest. Things happen, I guess. You can't call anything impossible. But the dude's like in his hideaway house. He's got like 3 different identities to try and like trick all the various people. And in one of the identities, he's just hanging out like 2 a.m, and this truck drives by and kicks this girl off the back of the truck and drives away. And he's like, do I leave her out there to die in the cold, or do I save her? And of course, he's a good hitman, right? He only murders certain people for money. So he goes and he saves her, and of course, he's like in his 40s and she's like 21. And of course, she's like, you're the most sexiest man that there ever was. He's like, oh, I don't have time for this. It's like very ridiculous, right? Her infatuation style is clearly Stephen King's like, I wish I was a hitman. I wish 21-year-olds hit on me kind of vibe that I got from this book. Still pretty good. The introduction of the female character there really kind of changes where the book is going and makes it kind of goofy for a while. And then, he escapes for a while. He gets some help from a friend of his. And that's all right. It's kind of a fun, like I said, on-the-road escape kind of book. Stephen King hates fat people, by the way, if you didn't know that. Anytime there's a fat person in his book, he talks about how fat he is and how he's going to die of a heart attack, like, all the time. And that happens in this book. There's one character. He must mention this character 40 times. And I want to say every single time he talks about how fat the guy is and how he's going to die soon. And I was like, that seems like a kind of a curious thing to just keep smacking. Maybe I'm just sensitive to it because I'm a Sir Chonk. But anyway, kind of a weird shit. He does this in a lot of other books. He really seems to hate on fat dudes. I'm pro-fat dude. But anyway, so at one point, I don't want to give you too many spoilers, but it seems like the person that sort of is like the main problem that Billy needs to get his, of course, revenge on for all the twisty turns. I don't want to go into too much detail. That person's not the last person. There's a second final boss, which the second final boss has not been introduced to us at all. And so it's kind of stupid that, like, okay, he goes through all this stuff, this main things happen, and he's kind of like, oh yeah, also this other guy you've never absolutely heard of in your entire life. That'll be the guy he has to, like, go after. And it's really deflating, Stephen King style, where he just kind of like adds this extra bit, and you're like, what is this? Just end it the first time. It would be better. And this book's got some problems, but still it's pretty fun in general.
I like that cover.
The cover's really good. It's got, I don't know if you can tell here, but the headlights kind of glow. Whippity boop de pow. Look at that. Glibbity glow. So that's kind of fun. So maybe that boosts up the total score. I don't know exactly where I would have put this on my total ranking. It probably wouldn't have been the ones that I kind of like, but they're flawed. So probably somewhere in the mid-30s. I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5 stars or a 6 out of 10 if you want to extrapolate. You know, an 18 out of 30 if this is the kind of star system you use. If it is, what's wrong with you? And I'm just going to really quick talk about this book later, which I also read recently. I read it really, really fast. It's a short book, and it reads pretty quickly. But it doesn't have much going on. He basically was like, what if I ripped off The Sixth Sense and then had a murder mystery tied to it that wasn't actually very mysterious, and we didn't really get the whole side or angle from. This was not particularly great. Yeah, I would not recommend people invest their time in reading this unless you're trying to read all the Stephen King. And it reads quick, but it's, like I said, it's just like a mash of like bad Sixth Sense and bad detective noir kind of stuff. Yeah, some of the dialogue is all right. The characters aren't too bad, but I didn't really enjoy it very much. I'd give maybe like a 2 out of 5, leaning on the crappier side. This would be in my second tier, so like almost to the bottom of the Stephen King list. We're like, it's not a complete garbage fire, but it's not something I would recommend anyone read. Whereas Billy Summers, although flawed, is mostly fun, and I would say go ahead and give that one a shot, suckers, just in case you weren't thinking about it. Yeah. And then, of course, the last book, Frog in a Top Hat. All right, that concludes this review of some books that I read. Yeah, I don't know if you care about it, but if you did, enjoy. Papa Gino's Knife says bye. Whee! Boop.